Hey everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, vocalist, songwriter Andrew Bentley. Yay!
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Very exciting times, Andrew. You play bass, and of course, you're an integral part of Jet Black Roses, and we do want to talk about that more in depth. However, we always like to go to the past. How did you get started in music and particularly on bass?
Well, my brother, who's our lead singer, he picked guitar first. No, that's not really it. Not really. I always had like a love affair with the bass. I asked my dad and mom for a bass at 8 years old, and I learned my first song, which was, I believe it was Patsy Cline, "I Fall to Pieces," the first day.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's a singer, so that helped. And so I just never really looked to another instrument. I never wanted to play bass and then have like another instrument and jump. My vision has always been, since a very young age, to be really good at this one thing instead of being kind of mediocre at a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always look to the greats like John Paul Jones or James Jamerson, just to name a couple. My dad, would buy me like Marcus Miller albums and things like that to cut my teeth on. So from a very early age, man, I was just infatuated with bass.
Nice. Now, are you self-taught or have you pursued further training?
I am self-taught. My dad taught me the rudiments. Here are the strings. Here's the notes. Here's a couple of scales.
Hmm.
And I locked myself in my room when I was a kid with the early days and the latter days, Led Zeppelin. And I would just press play, learn a little bit, press stop and rewind. And I would do that with these CDs until I had learned both albums, which took a lot of time and hours and hours. And that's how I cut my teeth. Also, like James Brown records, things like that, Funky President, little, things like that moved me. Bass to me was never about the technique as much as it was like, how does this feel? How does this make me feel? And that's still my approach today is like, when we're making records and we write our own songs with Jet Black Roses. So when we're in a studio session, that's kind of my approach to this day is like, how does this make me feel? How does this bass line? Because if it makes me feel a certain kind of way, I think that people are going to take that away, if it's a groove or, maybe sometimes it's just a diamond on the E, like I do in our upcoming single, Kiss from a Rose. We covered Seal's Kiss from a Rose. And that was kind of my approach, was simplistic and letting the vocals breathe. So, to me also it's about the song. It's not just about like what's this cool thing I can do, but it is kind of a mix of both in the same sense.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, with Jet Black Roses, you're one part of technically kind of a trio because it's your brother, Trey, and then Tyler also in guitar. I see all the strings. You have a sit-in drummer when you need him. Is that pretty much how you're working that?
Well, we're an Atlanta-based Southern rock band, so I mean, we've always been huge on collaboration, and
Okay.
we've kind of got a Rolodex of musicians that are just like the badasses. Like right now, we're playing with Rhett Huffman, who's on keys. He toured with American Aquarium extensively. Richie Martinez on drums. He actually is living in Nashville, but he's in a band called Arch Echo. They're world famous prog metal band, actually, but his mentality was like, I want to get into this form of like a band that can also like produce songs that people can connect with lyrically. And so he's been playing with us. And we also have been using a guitarist, Jeff Wood, on utility. And so we have a 6-piece unit that's out there. And the thing that never changes is my brother, myself, and Tyler. We're the vocal force. We're the songwriters of all of our stuff. And, when we're up front and kind of the face, but that's something I've always craved, is having a band, like a real band. And
Mhm.
so we do try to surround ourselves with people that want to be in it for the long haul. And I feel like we've landed on these guys, and I hope that they're the only guys we ever use from now on because they're so awesome. But we've not been afraid to explore that, and you grow from that. You find out what you like and what you don't. Plus, you get to be out there with a lot of friends, and
Nice, nice. Well, and the start of the band again, you mentioned your brother. Between you and your brother, you guys just decide one day, hey, we need to make a band, and there you go.
well, kind of. Uh, I mean, how do you explain that? Your brothers, we shared a room,
Yeah.
lived in a house with our grandmother in the room next to us. So, I think we've always had a closeness and a bond, and music was always just in our life. You know, our mom is a singer. She's done records with like Dennis Crouch, who's an excellent bass player, toured with Robert Plant, you know, Elton John. So I grew up in a studio with like him and Mark Thornton, who's played, you know, with Jerry Reed and a lot of those kind of cats producing my mom's records. And I just thought that was normal. And so did my brother. You know, we just thought, oh, this is just life. And so when Trey and I started playing, you know, it just felt natural. It didn't feel like a decision we had to make. You know, they wrote their own songs as well, grew us up on really awesome records, Flying Burrito Brothers, Emmylou Harris, you know, Jackson Browne, things like that, Late for the Sky. And so songwriting was kind of something we were trying to hone in from a very early age. And playing bass and singing didn't really come naturally to me, to be honest. Like playing bass did, but singing while playing bass, a lot of times it's crazy because I'm holding down the low end and I actually sing high harmony in this group. So, you know, I'm singing both spectrums of this band, low end, high end, and I'm trying to hold it down. And that's something that's been a lifetime, honestly, since we started as kids honing in on. And so now it feels natural, but, you know, just because it looks natural doesn't mean it started that way. So
I hear you. I hear you. Well, I couldn't possibly sing and play at the same time, so you have my admiration there. Now, you guys are working on a new album. We'll be dropping here as we're speaking. We're coming up on October, but it'll be October 2025. Tell us about that project.
Well, dude, it's been a long time in the making. This is our debut self-titled album, Jet Black Roses, and we started, well, the conception of this group really started in 2018. Trey and I were kind of a duo before then, country rock kind of thing, Americana. And we needed a guitar player for a thing we did in Nashville. Had a mutual friend hook us up with Tyler. Tyler came to do this gig, and the first night we were together, we ended up writing songs together. So, you know, from that moment, we just locked in, never stopped writing. And then the pandemic happened and we just went ham on writing, dude. We wrote probably like 3 or 4 concept records, like written and recorded during that time frame. And the guy that discovered us, a guy named Don Perry in Atlanta, he discovered us at some event, TJ Martell or something that we were doing. And he said, y'all need to meet my son. And we said, oh, okay, cool. Well, his son, unbeknownst to us, was Greg Archilla, who's produced, you know, and mix engineered for Collective Soul, Neil Young, James Brown, Mavis Staples. He did the Christmas Vacation song with Mavis Staples. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on with all the acts that he's worked with. So we started writing with him the first time we met, and we ended up writing like 13 songs in 2 days. So we went in and recorded those. This is fast forwarded now to like 2022. And so we had some stuff, and he said that what he realized in the recording process before, you know, we went in the studio even, is that he took everything out of the mix except our vocals and realized, oh, that's the thing. That's the special thing. And so when we did go into the studio at Ronnie's place in Nashville, Ronnie Millsap's studio, we recorded with our bands, and we also brought in some cats like Rob McNally and Luke Mosley on keys. And just, you know, we kind of just did our band and those guys. We recorded live. I played my PV T40, my 1978, on a lot of that stuff. And after that, you know, we didn't, instead of releasing it, you know, as a project, we were like, hey, let's go on tour. Let's go play some shows. Well, we ended up sharing the stage with Styx, ended up sharing the stage extensively with them, Sammy Hagar and The Circle, Michael Anthony, you know, invited us side stage to watch their show, pointing at us doing this, you know, imprinting rock and roll baptism, you know. Yeah. And so after that, you know, we kind of had to take a look at what we had done in Nashville, and we're like, okay, there's a lot of good in there, a lot of good. We cut a song called Holy Water that we got David Campbell and the LA Orchestra to cut strings on it. A lot of really good stuff on that session. But we had written a lot on the road in a Sprinter van and hotel rooms, you know, as you do. So we ended up going to Tree Sound Studios in Atlanta after the road, and we cut 13 songs that we had written. And so then we were looking at 2 batches of songs going, how does this make a record? because, you know, we've kind of developed the sound a little further. Well, fast forward again, we just got out of Farmland Studios in Nashville, where we cut 4 more songs, including Kiss from a Rose. That's going to be on the album. And also a song called Barroom Believers that is now getting radio play all over Atlanta and Georgia in general. And iHeartRadio is blasting that out. And, you know, really how I approached the album was just by song itself. Like, I always want to use a different bass for a different song. I always want to bring a new vibe. And I'm really not huge on using a lot of effects. I like the bass and my fingers to do the storytelling there. And I mean, call me old school or whatever, you know, I just don't like to, and there's some times where it does help. Like, I cut a song called Psycho Boogie Hoochie Coo.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if you've heard it yet, but
I have. It's a mouthful to say. I'm glad you said it because I was going to have trouble.
Well, it's like a trip, you know, but I cut that on a Fender JP90 that Tyler had hanging in the studio. And I did play that through a Moog envelope filter. So, you know, there was that cool aspect, and it called for that for the song, you know. So yeah. My approach with bass really is looking at each song as its own approach for my playing, as well as what it needs tonally. And I feel like, you know, I've used every bass up on the record, so I'm going to have to buy some more now. Yeah. You know, that's how it goes. But yeah, I'm very happy with how everything has turned out. Played the 73 Tele bass on a couple of things as well. And I'm pretty proud of what we've accomplished with this album. It's not about the bass. It's more about the songs itself. But the bass, you know, when you do hear the low end and stuff, I think you'll appreciate the different tonal qualities that you get through the entire record.
Indeed. Well, that's where the magic is. I think on most of the famous tunes that we think of, is always that bass line that does exactly what you're saying. It's how it makes you feel, because It reaches at a level where it's not just the notes, it's in the middle of where you are. In addition to the instruments, again, amplification wise, you have any particular preferences?
Yeah, I've been playing through the Dark Glass, the 900V. I don't know, man, just being on the road and in the studio is just really the most versatile piece of equipment that I could own for what I'm doing. You know, I can shape sounds like for the rooms. I can also, you know, shape in the studio. I can like chase tones like right there in front of me. And it's got such a wide range, man. And I don't, you know, have to have a fuzz knob on that thing. It's got those overdrives, you know, that are insane. And, you know, and that's really been my biggest secret weapon, I think, in my arsenal, has just been having that dark glass head. Plus, it's lightweight and I can travel with it everywhere. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you know, just having that thing, and with each bass, it's going to take a different shape. And so really kind of endless possibilities there. And that's been a huge deal for me. And then as far as my cabinet, I just played through a 410 Fender Neo bass amp. And that's been my rig touring and in the studio. So
very cool. Very cool. Well, with the exciting news of the album, I'm guessing that there's some touring plans and stuff in the works. So what's coming down the pike?
Well, with the album drop, we're actually going to be doing some spots between now and the rest of the year for album releases, like parties, listening stuff. We're going to do some live stuff. My biggest advice to people right now is just to follow us on our social media and on our website, jetblackroses.com. Social media, Instagram is just at jetblackrosesofficial. But, you know, we're going to be live streaming a lot of events as well. And that's our focus really from now until the end of the year. And then as 2026 pops off, I can't really announce anything right now, but we do have touring plans that are going to involve you getting to see us around the country. So
nice. Well, that's usually the part that people are most interested in. Where and when can I see these guys?
You have to follow us to find out. How about that? And you know, that's what we want. We've been calling our followers Barroom Believers based off the single that we have right now. And that's really what they've become. We've got people that are emailing radio stations and just loyal fans. I feel like that's something I've learned about our fan base, is they are loyal. And so that's what we want you to do. If you've never heard of us before, show up, and you're going to be treated like family, not only by us, but by our existing fan base. And we want you to be a Barroom Believer. So show up, and you're going to know all that inside stuff. You're going to get to see inside of studios. We live stream from studio sessions, songwrites. We kind of like are dropping the veil behind the rock and roll lifestyle that we live.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to see an inside, look at that. And it's not accessible to everyone, but through us, it could be. And so that's kind of what we're doing, giving people an inside look.
Very cool concept. Well, Andrew, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Very excited about the debut album dropping October 2025. Folks, make sure you check that out. And then, of course, stay on the social media, the website to make sure that if they're going to be in a venue near you, that you show up because, after all, live music is the real experience here.
That's facts. That's
There,
facts. And don't forget, too, Kiss from a Rose. We are so excited. You're going to love this arrangement that we put together on this song.
very cool. Well, folks, you've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine, Andrew Bentley.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.